Okay, so this is the CLUP Chapter 1 review questions, question 14. So this is an example of one of those commission questions where you have multiple parts to your calculation because you get paid different amounts for different bands of sales. So let's start. So in this case, for the first one, we've sold a property worth $365,000. So for the first 100,000, we're told that we're going to get 7.5%. So we'd be going 100,000 times is 7.5%. Now that needs to be converted to a decimal. So don't forget you're dividing by 100 to convert your percentage to a decimal. 100 has 2 zeros, so we're moving that decimal 2 decimal places, which will give us a 0.075 as the number that we need to use to multiply. Now, of course, you can put this into your calculator and that would be very, very simple, and at times that will be an option, but sometimes you're going to get questions like this in a calculator free. So try not to put your head in the sand and avoid the mental, and I'm going to talk you through that process. So people tend to overthink this. Some people will revert to the Arabic method, and certainly it's going to be simple because there's a whole lot of zeros, so there's not going to be many numbers to calculate. But it's going to be easier in this case to just do the maths and remember that the number of zeros tells you how many places you're going to move that decimal. So here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. So I need to move my decimals 5 places. 5 places to make the number bigger, of course. So if I started from 0.075, when I move that 5 places, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and my decimal would move out here, which would give me 7,500. So I'm going to put my answer there, 7,500, and because I don't have too much space, I'm going to remove that working now. Okay, the next little phase that you've got is that you're getting 5% for the next 200,000. So again, I've got 200 because I've exceeded the 300 altogether, so I'm going to get that 5% on that full 200,000. So 200,000 times 0.05 when I move that decimal 2 places to turn that into a decimal. And again, I need to be able to do this mentally. So often with these questions, you're going to be able to make use of either 10% or 1%. In this case, we're going to make use of the 10%. To find 10% of any number, there's 10 lots of 10% in a whole, so I'm just dividing by 10. So I'm going to move that decimal 1 decimal spot. So 10% would be 20,000. 5% is half of 10%, so half of 20,000 will be my 10,000. So in this case, I'm going to have 10,000 for that band. And then I've got my last bracket, of course. I get 1.5% for each dollar thereafter, which is each dollar over. So in this case, for each dollar over 300,000. Now I had 365, so I've got $65,000 over the 300,000 so far. And I'm going to times that by 1.5%. So times 0.015. And again, if I have to do this mentally, I'm going to make use of that 1%. So 1%, there's 100 lots of 1% in any number, so I'm dividing by 100. So I move my decimal 2 places, which means that 1% would be equal to 650. Now I want 1.5%, so I want half of that again. So, a lot of people struggle with that, but just break it down in bits. So half of 600 would be 300, so I know I'm going to add another 300. And half of my 50 would be 25, so I'm going to add another 25. So all up, I'm going to have 0 and 0 plus 5. 5 and 2 is 7, and 6 and 3 is 9. So you can just do your little calculations on the side anywhere, as long as we can see you working. So 975 would be the amount of money that I'd get in that bracket. So I'd pop that in. And then don't forget to add them up. Don't forget to finish your question. So then I'm just going to add those 3 numbers up, and that would give me a total of 18,475. Now I've done this fairly messy, but if you're not good with your adding up and that sort of thing, then keep that tidy. So if I was to repeat that on the side, so 7,500, my 10,000. So, line them all up, and then the 975. So when I do those additions, initially I'm looking down each column, so that's where my 5 came from. Then I'm looking down the next one, that gave me my 7. 5 and 9 was my 14, so that gave me that 4, and I would have carried a little 1 over here, and that would have given me my 8 here, and then my 1 there, and so on. And that's where I got that from. I'm going to remove that again because I don't have the space, but keep those things in mind because it tends to be the mental maths that lets people down, and sometimes it's just careless adding errors. Okay, for the next question it's going to be much the same, But now we've just got a lot more money. So the first two bands are going to be exactly the same. So if I was to highlight this, we've got 970. So I'm going to have all of this again and all of that 200 again. So when I do my working, I really don't need to repeat those. So I've got 7,500 for my first 100,000. I've got 10,000 for my next 200,000. And then how many dollars am I over? Well, what have I got? 970, take away the 300,000, means that my working out here would be 670,000 times the 0.015. So, oops, I didn't put all my zeros in on my 670. So I did that up for you. So 670,000 times 0.015. And when you do that, you're going to get, for that last amount, it's going to be $10,050. So again, you're going to add those three numbers up. So adding all those up, and that would give me 27,550. Keep it neat if your mental's not great. Okay, question 15. A salesperson receives a monthly retainer of $1,300 or $1,300 if you prefer, plus 3.5% of sales. What was this person's weekly income if total sales for the week amounted to $42,000? A retainer, as we've said before, is a set amount of money that you earn regardless of whether you sell anything at all. So the $13,000 is just a set amount, and then plus 3.5%, so it's just 3.5% of the sales. So the sales were $42,000 times the 3.5% as a decimal, which will be 0.035. Again, I've just moved that decimal 2 places. And then you just put that into your calculator and away you go. Ken is paid a retainer of $250 per week, plus a commission of 3.75% on all goods sold. Last week he was paid $850, so what was the value of his sales? So in this case, you've got to do a little bit of algebra again because they haven't told you the sales. So what you're going to think to yourself is, if I knew everything, how would I have calculated his pay? So the retainer would have been a set amount, so $250, regardless if he sold nothing, plus his commission. His commission was 3.75%, so 0.0375, and we would have times that by his sales, which is what we don't know, so we'll just call it X. And we know that the answer to that, had we done it, had we known all those things, would have been $850. Now, it's enough in this course that if you can use your class pad, if you just type all that in, you can now do that, highlight that equation and go into interactive advanced solve. That's just in your main screen of your class pad, and that will throw out the answer for you. If you had to do the algebra, and realistically, you're pretty much almost never required to do those sorts of things in this course, so you don't really need to stress out about it. But if you were, let's go through and do it. So if we had to, our end objective is to get X on its own. So the first thing we shift, and I'm not going to have much space here, but I'll give it a go anyway, 0.0375 times X. So the first thing we'd shift, that's all staying where it is, the 850 staying. The first thing we shift is the loose things. So initially I'd move that and I would subtract that 250, which is going to give me 0.0375x is equal to, what have we got, 650? Oops, sorry, 600. My bad. Keep an eye on me. And then we want to get X on its own. So the X is staying where it is, the 600 staying where it is on the right-hand side. What needs to shift now is the number attached to the X. I was timesing that by X, so when I move it, I do the opposite, which is dividing by X, which would be 375, okay. And so if we bang that into a calculator, 600 divided by 0.0375, and they're unlikely to ask you to do that kind of thing mentally, so don't stress, would give me an answer of 16,000. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So this is the last one in this section, and then we're going to do a new video for the spreadsheets, which are the questions that come after this one. So Basil works as a salesman and receives a retainer of $360 per week. Last week his total earnings amounted to $900 when he sold goods to the value of $24,000. Calculate his commission. So this is exactly the same as what we did in the previous question, except this time we do know the sales and we don't know the commission. So we're going to set it up in exactly the same way. So he's got his retainer of $360, that was a given, plus the rate, which we don't know, so now it's the rate that we're calling the x, times the sales, which was 24,000. And when we did this, we know that it's going to equal to 900. So again, in my class pad, I can literally just put that in and go highlight interactive advanced solve. So I'll just pop that into mine. Okay, and that gives me an answer of, so I'm going to wind up with x is equal to 0.0225. Don't forget to interpret it. We always put it into an equation as a decimal. So when we interpret it as a rate, and they've said here, calculate his commission rate, so we need to express it as a decimal. So as a decimal, I'm going to times it by 100, which will give me 2.25%. Now again, if you wanted to do it mentally, then you're just going to do it step by step. So if I was doing it mentally, the first thing I move is the loose thing. So I'd move that 360 first. So I would have wound up with x times 24,000, staying where it was on the left-hand side of the equation, equals the 900, which stays where it was. And then I'd move the 360. I was adding it, so the opposite of that will be subtracting it. So I would take the 360. And that would give me 240. So I've got x times the 24,000 is equal to 240. And then the x itself would be equal to the two, so the x has stayed where it is on the right, the 240 stayed where it is, sorry, x was on the left, the 240 staying where it is on the right, and then I'd move the 24,000. I was timesing, so the opposite of timesing is dividing, so when I shift it, I would divide, and I would wind up with that same answer of 2.25%. Okay, thank you.